We gathered at my Uncle Ben's house for Thanksgiving this year. His rural home sits on a large lake, surrounded by forest. While more rustic than fancy, the private, spacious setting provided plenty of room to host our holiday celebration. My uncle's festivities always felt more like a party. Music played as we drank beers, played games like cornhole and basketball, and snacked for hours. Around 5:30 p.m., as the sun began to set, Aunt Mel and Uncle Ben started bringing the food out to the gazebo, where they had set up an outdoor dinner table surrounded by string lights. Just as we began eating at 6 p.m., my cousin noticed a figure standing motionlessly at the edge of the forest, watching us in the darkness. Uncle Ben, already a few drinks in, laughed it off at first, but went to investigate. When the man ran off into the trees, Uncle Ben joked it must be one of the local nuts. But soon after, I spotted the man again, this time closer to the lakeside. Before Uncle Ben could approach, we noticed a second intruder on the opposite side of the yard. When confronted, both retreated into the woods. By this point, the mood had shifted from lighthearted to uneasy. We hastily cleaned up dinner and retreated inside, where the lights were left on as extra protection. Through closed blinds, we occasionally spotted figures lurking outside. When I ventured out alone for more beer, a noise under the gazebo startled me into a sprint back to the house. Uncle Ben's call to police was deeply uncharacteristic, reflecting how threatened we now felt surrounded by an unseen presence outside. The tension mounted until a brick shattered the kitchen window, attached to a chilling note threatening us to leave now. The following day, even Uncle Ben's Trump flag was missing, perhaps providing clues to the trespassers' motives. There were clearly unstable forces at play on this Thanksgiving night. The police arrived quickly and searched the surrounding areas but found no sign of the intruders. They took the note as evidence and increased patrols in the neighborhood that night. Still unsettled, no one felt comfortable staying at the isolated house. We packed up and all returned to my parents' place in town. As shaky details were recounted, theories about the stranger's intentions multiplied with no answers. Over the next few days, odd occurrences continued. My cousin reported seeing an unfamiliar vehicle idling near her house late one night. Uncle Ben found footprints close to the house when letting his dogs out. Then one morning, my aunt found her car windows smashed in the driveway. A final note left inside read, "We're watching. Get out." That crossed a serious line. This was no longer just scare tactics. My uncle filed a restraining order and ramped up security. But the following weekend, he spotted two men cut through his backwoods as darkness fell. He called out, and they raced off into the night. No arrests have been made so far. The sheriff is certain it's the work of a few local troublemakers, yet their extreme actions remain inexplicable. Our family celebrations have moved elsewhere from now on. That Thanksgiving we'll never forget, and the stalkers who haven't been heard from since, but haven't really gone away either. The strange incidents continued to escalate in the weeks after Thanksgiving. Other neighbors reported suspicious activity on their properties as well. It became clear this wasn't just a threat against my uncle's family. The entire rural community was unsettled. A neighborhood watch was formed and people kept close tabs on one another. Through some creative social media sleuthing, my tech-savvy cousin was able to trace some of the more disturbing, harassing messages back to a handful of dubious online profiles. One profile photo looked eerily familiar. It was one of the men my uncle had spotted in his woods that night. Finally, they had a lead to work with. Armed with the online discovery, the sheriff obtained warrants to surveil a few properties of known local troublemakers. It didn't take long before a break in the case came. Late one night, officers observed a truckload of masked men trespassing on a neighbor's land. A stop was made, and in the back was found piles of stolen goods, weapons, and the damning piece of evidence, the handwritten threatening notes. The captured men confessed to the months-long stalking and blamed their strange fixation on my uncle's family over some past petty feud. Justice was served and the neighborhood could finally breathe easy again. While the reality of living with such unstable neighbors still lingered, my family took solace knowing those responsible were facing the consequences of their deranged actions. Order was restored just in time for the next holiday season. While arrests were made, my family couldn't help but feel uneasy that the true motives and extent of the stalking were never fully uncovered. Loose ends remained. Months passed without further incident, but the anniversary of that troubled Thanksgiving was fast approaching. My parents insisted we gather again at Uncle Ben's, hoping time could heal old wounds. The night before the big reunion, Uncle Ben received a chilling phone call from the sheriff. Apparently, one of the captured stalkers had broken out of jail in a riot. An APB was put out, but he had not been located. The next day, as our family arrived at the house, an eerie silence hung heavy over the normally lively property. Uncle Ben and Aunt Mel seemed distracted, sneaking glances into the dense woods looming behind. As dusk fell and guests began to depart, shots suddenly rang out from the dark tree line. Bullets shredded the side of the house as everyone scrambled inside in a panic. It became horrifyingly clear the escaped stalker wasn't done tormenting them. He had returned, more unhinged than before, seeking vengeful retribution. Barricaded inside, Uncle Ben exchanged fire with the sniper while the police were called. A nail-biting standoff ensued through the long night. Would law enforcement arrive in time before he broke through our flimsy defenses? The climax of this attempted revenge is still unfolding. Stay tuned for further updates on whether good can finally overcome the evil that has haunted this family for so long.